Welcome, everybody. I'm Denise Forte. I'm the president and CEO of EdTrust. I really want to welcome all of you here, as well as our friends in the media. We have really impressive speakers lined up today to talk about what's at stake for our students and their families with the Trump-Musk-McMahon effort to dismantle the Department of Education. Despite today's gaslighting by the press secretary about the timing of the executive order, the proposed outcome will be the same. It's what they laid out in Project 2025, and it's what they told us that he wanted to do along the campaign trail. And now that day has come. There's no question the future of our country depends on how well we educate today's students. Unfortunately, this administration does not share this belief. I'm so deeply gratified and really we are honored to have Governor Hochul from New York join us today. Governor, it's your stage.
Denise, thank you so much. And I know we'll be hearing from Becky Pringle. I want to thank her for extraordinary work as the president of NEA. And also joining you is someone that I'm extremely fond of, Barack Obama's Secretary of Education, who I was able to snag to become our chancellor of our entire state university system, Chancellor John King. So you do have an all-star cast here. But I think about casts and performances. Think about the fact that Donald Trump could have picked anybody he wanted to be the Secretary of Education. A lot of talented people out there who are dedicated to our children. Now, who did he pick? He picked a pro wrestling mogul who is in the process of body slamming our Department of Education. So what does that mean for a place like New York? $5 billion in cuts. We're talking about billions of dollars lost in Pell Grants, money for kids with disabilities, programs that are helping our kids in rural areas and mental health. I mean, what they're doing is saying our kids don't matter. What's more important is that we slash for the sake of slashing and also be able to fund tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. So instead of supporting a math class, they're supporting tax breaks for the buddies at Mar-a-Lago. So that's the reality we're dealing with here in New York. And I have to give some news to everybody. And this is a message from all the governors. We're not going to be able to backfill losses like this scale, $5 billion. So the children are going to suffer. But there's only one way to reverse this before the next presidential election, and that is in the midterms. That is what happens in 2026, and that's another whole topic, but that's what I'm laser focused on, is building a firewall in the House of Representatives at least, and possibly the Senate, so we can stop the insanity and put our focus on the kids. What we do now with this generation of kids is going to make a difference for generations to come because it's an investment in the future workforce. And we are in global competition with other countries. And if we stop these investments now, then we're basically saying we give up. We're not even going to compete. I'm not going to stand for that here in the state of New York. So as always, I'm calling on teachers and advocates and parents and students. Use your voices and stand up and scream from the mountaintops. This must stop. And I want to shame them into everything they're contemplating and doing and saying, don't do this to our kids. I'm New York's first mom governor. So anything that happens to our children is personal to me. So that's my message from New York.
Governor, thank you so much. Thank you for leading the way for New York's children and also this country. We need more of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look, folks, there is strong and widespread opposition to dismantling the Department of Education. We are talking to teachers, families, students, superintendents of schools, college leaders, policymakers. You're going to hear from many of them on this call, underscoring the urgency and the depth of concern. This dismantling of the Department of Education is not what families want. They've made their voices heard. They want a department that provides excellent education for all students, who safeguards these students. Unfortunately, this administration has no idea how to deliver on any of that. EdTrust has been actively working with communities to ensure their voices are heard. We have engaged directly with the most impacted, amplifying their concerns, lifting up their concerns, and pushing for policies that center opportunity and access for all students, and especially those traditionally underserved. This isn't just one group speaking out, as you will hear from our speakers. It is a collective moment demanding change. This broad coalition tells us we believe in public education. We believe in a federal role that protects students, and action is necessary. I'm so glad to have my friend and amazing leader, John King, former Secretary of Education, current Chancellor of the State University of New York. John, welcome.
Thanks so much, Denise, and really appreciate your leadership and Governor Hochul's leadership. It's heartbreaking to be in a conversation about the dismantling of the education department. We should be talking about national leadership on improving educational outcomes. How do we close the gaps in performance, particularly for our lowest income students, for our students with disabilities? We should be talking about how do we help more students graduate from college and go on to successful careers in the jobs that we need to fill in this 21st century economy. But instead, we're talking about the Trump administration's misguided plans to end the Department of Education. The stakes are very high. The governor talked about it. If you eliminate the Title I program, you're talking about taking billions of dollars from the schools that serve low-income students. That will mean teacher layoffs. That will mean larger class sizes. That will mean fewer after-school and enrichment programs, fewer AP classes, fewer opportunities for kids. If you take away the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act funding that the department delivers to schools, you're talking about longer waits for families to get speech language services, to get students who are struggling to read the help they need to succeed. If you take away the Pell Grant program, you're talking about denying the American dream to countless students who depend on that program to access higher education. This is exactly the wrong direction for the country. The history of the education department is as a civil rights agency, the place that ensures that students with disabilities get the services they need, that English learners get the help that they need, that women are protected against sexual assault and sexual harassment on campuses. That's where this happens, in the Office for Civil Rights at the department. Taking that away harms students and families. This is part of a broader attack on public education, on public institutions. And this is a moment where we need Congress to step up and stand up, and we need state and local leaders to make their voice heard in defense of public education.
Thank you, Chancellor King. So appreciate that you've been here with us today. And also very excited to hear from one of my friends and colleagues, Becky Pringle, President of the National Education Association.
Hey, Denise, I think President Pringle's running a couple minutes late, but
no worries, no worries. We are moving on. We'll hear from her later. So now I'm really excited because, again, another friend and colleague and a mom of boys just like me. We're going to hear from founder and president of the National Parents Union, Keri Rodrigues.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, that is actually my most important title, is being Matthew, Miles, and David's mom. It's also my honor to be the president of the National Parents Union, which is an affiliated network of about 1,800 pockets of parent power in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, representing about 2 million families across the country. And I'm here today on behalf of all of them to sound the alarm about this administration's intent to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. And we know that this is going to cause significant chaos for American families. We know that it is going to have devastating consequences for our public schools, for our teachers, but most importantly, our children. Because this executive order, it's not just about bureaucracy. It's about our children's future and their lives. And if we don't stop it, families everywhere are going to directly feel the impact. Because let's be clear about what this means. The DOE, or ED, provides billions of dollars to our school every single year. funding that ensures that our support staff, our special education services, our resources for struggling schools are there, and we can depend on them. This executive order would gut that funding. It would leave states and local districts scrambling to fill the gaps. And let's be honest about that, especially in our red states, many of them will not be able to. We're going to witness massive layoffs of teachers and support staff, larger class sizes, school closures. It's going to force kids to travel longer distances to get an education. And the loss of funding for special education programs for kids like mine will be absolutely catastrophic. Let's be transparent about this. Pushing education down to the states doesn't work. We've done this before. And in fact, dismantling the US Department of Education, we tried it before under the Reagan administration, and it was a mess, and Ronald Reagan had to walk it back. But we need to remember what education was like before we had a US Department of Education. There is a reason why we created this agency. Because 50 or 60 years ago, you had children who were blind, who were deaf, who had Down syndrome, who were denied access to classrooms. We had children with autism who weren't sent to classrooms, they were sent to institutions. We did that. And parents were forced to seek relief from the federal government through lawsuits. Parents were forced to sue for access and had to be walked into classrooms. Our children had to be walked into classrooms by federal marshals because states were not making the right decisions. There is a reason why we had to create the US Department of Education to make sure our kids had equitable access to education. Because before this agency's creation, parents were left to our own devices, and too many of us don't have those resources. This is a direct attack on our school's ability to function. And who is going to pay that price? It's our children, it's families, it's millions of families who are already under attack by this administration, who are worried about the chaos every single day that we are feeling from these nonstop executive orders. So I urge every parent, every educator, every community member to stand up and fight back. This is not about politics. This is about ensuring that every single child, no matter their zip code, no matter their income level, no matter their ability, has access to education, and a quality one. Dissolving the US Department of Education is going to be a bureaucratic nightmare for parents. And we've got to demand that Congress stand up and take action to protect our schools. We have to make sure that our voices are heard today and every day. The future of public education and the future of our children depends on it.
Keri, thank you so much. And thank you for just sort of centering us on why this matters, our students and our families. We will now hear from Dr. Winnie Williams-Hall, a teacher with Educators for Excellence, who will tell us about some of the direct impact of this decision on students. Dr. Hall?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Dr. Winnie Williams-Hall, and I teach in the elementary setting as a special education teacher for Chicago Public Schools. I'm also a member of Educators for Excellence, and I'm here representing 40,000 members nationwide who advocate for teachers to have a leading voice in policies that directly impact our classrooms. I'm here today because I, like thousands of educators across the country, am outraged by this administration's reckless plans to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. Confirming Linda McMahon to lead the department with the knowledge that she would agree to eliminate it, it actually shows how little our leaders care about our nation's kids. As educators, we see firsthand the critical role that the department plays. We understand that it strives hard to ensure that every child, especially children with disabilities, English language learners, and students from marginalized communities, has access to a high-quality education. Eliminating the Department of Education is not just irresponsible, it is a direct attack on students, schools, and the future of education in America. And it will make it harder for students to succeed, not just in school, but in life. A well-educated population is essential for a country's social and economic well-being. This administration has professed to want to make America great again. But this move, like many others it has made, does not support that goal. It, in fact, does the opposite. As a special educator, I am intimately familiar with the ways that the department's funding, guidance, and oversight support my students. In Chicago, in particular, we already feel the impact of budgets that don't meet our needs. Reduced special education federal funding will mean the loss of paraprofessionals. It would mean schools sharing social workers instead of having their own social worker assigned to that school. It would mean the lack of one-on-one support, failing grades, lower self-esteem, and students basically feeling like they're lost in a crowd. These students already suffer the cost of an inequitable education system. Eliminating the department will make this even more true, and it means moving backwards instead of forward. The consequences will be felt by students who can least afford it. E4E's 2025 National Teacher Survey shows that teachers resoundingly reject President Trump's educational policies. So instead of dismantling the department, educators are calling for real solutions that support and not sabotage our schools. Fully funded public schools, safe and inclusive classrooms, and a curriculum that reflects the truth. Listen, there's no system in place today that's without flaws. We understand that. And I agree that change is needed. So, as educators, we're calling on Congress to oppose any attempt to dismantle the department and instead commit to reimagining public education. We refuse to stand by while our students' futures are put at risk. The stakes are too high to be silent. Our students are counting on us, and we will not back down. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams-Hall. And I'm so glad that you brought up the fact that we are not about the status quo, right? We know that there are areas of improvement that we need to tackle. We are not about the status quo, but we do believe in reimagining public education. Thank you so much for that. Now we are going to hear from Renee Seckel from Red Wine and Blue. She's going to provide us additional thoughts from the parent perspective. Renee?
Thank you, Denise. Hi, my name is Renee Seckel, and I'm the Deputy Director of Distributed Organizing at Red Wine and Blue. But more importantly, I'm the mother of 2 public school students in Wake County, North Carolina, as well as one very recent grad. Since 2011, all 3 of my kids have enjoyed the solid grounding and the stability that our public schools provide. I stand in awe of the teachers and administrators who make miracles for our children every day, even as they're constantly asked to do more with less. And that's why I'm here today to sit in protest of President Trump's intention to demolish the federal agency responsible for making sure our children have the best possible education. The U.S. Department of Education looks out for the most vulnerable kids, kids with disabilities, kids in small rural districts that can't really afford to educate their children with local tax dollars, and kids who live in areas of high poverty. Not only does the Department of Education provide much needed funding for school children, but it also serves a critical role in protecting children from discrimination at school. So I ask, why would the Trump administration be looking to dissolve it? Why are Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Linda McMahon so hell-bent on defunding public schools and harming the tens of millions of children who attend those schools? In my own state of North Carolina, federal funding makes up nearly 20% of our public school budget. We've got about 1.5 million public school children, and almost half of them are what the policymakers call economically disadvantaged. 13% of our kids, including one of mine, rely on IEPs or 504 plans supported by federal funding. But President Trump wants to take away the agency and the funding that helps make sure that these kids can get a decent education. School districts will be left to find ways to fill these massive cuts to their budgets, and students will get hurt. Linda McMahon has claimed that the federal government is merely handing education back to the states, but that in itself is an astonishingly callous statement. Because let me tell you, the state isn't going to compensate for that lost federal funding. To the contrary, our Republican legislature has, for my entire adult life, and I am not young, been defying state court orders to fund our schools to a bare minimum constitutional standard, while at the same time pouring almost $1 billion a year into private school vouchers for the richest people in North Carolina. Without federal help, schooling in North Carolina will increasingly be allocated only to wealthy, white, non-disabled, straight kids. And that isn't okay. It is not okay for the United States of America to proclaim its greatness while its president and his followers systematically and methodically go about hurting children. So I call upon all school officials, all members of state, county, and local school boards, and all parents to stand up against the closing of the Department of Education and to stand up for our children and the public schools they attend. At Run White and Blue, we are encouraging our community to spread the word about what Trump is planning to do to our public schools, research their school boards to see who's on it and what they're doing to protect our students, and to stand up every day communicating with our legislators about the need to keep the Department of Education open. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Really important and powerful words. I just want to lift up something you said about what Project 2025 hopes to achieve, what this administration hopes to achieve. It is really tied to making sure that families who are already taking advantage of vouchers have more access to more money, that it is a giveaway to these families. It is not about providing a quality education to all. And here's someone that knows about this. I'm so pleased to be able to welcome the president of the National Education Association, Becky Pringle, who has been leading the charge in so many ways on behalf of nearly 3 million teachers. Thank you, Becky, for joining us.
Oh, it's good to be with you in community as we stand up and fight for our kids, what they need and what they deserve. I am Becky Pringle. I taught middle school science for 31 years before I had the honor of being the president of this nation's largest union, the National Education Association. What that allows me to do is travel all over the country and listen to millions of voices of educators, teachers, support staff, from those who teach our kids to those who nurse and nurture our kids, to those who drive our kids or feed our kids, and to parents and to the students themselves. And this is what I hear. This is not what this country is about. For us to be focused on taking more away from our students instead of giving them more in a time when we are still recovering from a pandemic, in a time when we know the gaps are getting wider and not closing, at a time when our students need us more. We have an administration that is letting Elon Musk and his billionaire buddies raid the Department of Education and take away those much needed funds from our kids so they can find tax cuts for billionaires. Let's be clear about what's happening. And it's very clearly stated in Project 2025. Now, I know that most people don't know necessarily what the Department of Education does, but they're finding out, aren't they? They're finding out that the federal government has a role to play in the education of our students. Every level of government has a role to play. And the historic role of the federal government has been to help close those gaps for our most vulnerable students, our Black and Brown and Indigenous students, our students living in poverty, our students who don't have housing security, our students whose parents are working 4 and 5 jobs, our students with disabilities. The federal government has a role to play. And we know the last thing those students, all of our students, need is for the over 400,000 jobs, education jobs, that are funded out of federal dollars. If those are cuts, we know what's going to happen. Our class sizes are going to, we know that our students won't get individualized attention that they need. We know they won't get the services that allow them to live into their brilliance. This is not okay. And that's why you are seeing educators and parents and community members who are saying, no, we will organize, We will mobilize, we will use our voices, and we will tell the true stories of students who are losing services. And by the way, it's not hypothetical. It's happening right now. Education jobs being lost right now. The restriction of students' right to learn and educators' right to teach is happening right now. That's why the NEA filed suit today against the efforts of this administration to limit our ability to teach the true history of this country and the impact that it has to this day, for our students to be able to see themselves and see each other so they can be the critical thinkers and collaborative problem solvers we need them to be the leaders of a just society. So we will not stop. We will stand up because we know that our students, our babies, are depending on us to be worthy of them.
Becky, so powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, everybody who's on this call today. We need to get the word out. Let me just, before I close, we need to hear from a student because that's where the real deal is. So Dulce Gasca Perez is joining us, and she's going to talk real talk, folks. So Dulce, come join us.
Thank you so much, Denise. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dulce Gasca Perez, and I'm a first-generation college student studying public policy at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm here today to speak to you because the future of students like me, students with disabilities, are being threatened by Trump's plans to dismantle the Department of Education. I grew up in North Carolina navigating a public education system that wasn't always built for students like me. Year after year, I had hoped that my teachers would be understanding of my disability, providing accommodations for my chronic pain and frequent absences. Every single day, protections from IDEA and Section 504 help disabled students thrive in the classroom without the fear that they could be denied the education they deserve. Every year since 1975, Congress has failed to meet its initial commitment to fund 40% of IDEA, which places the responsibility of making up that difference on states and local schools. That shortfall puts a massive strain on resources, making it harder for schools to support students with disabilities. Right now, the future of disability rights is on the line. If Donald Trump gets his way, already underfunded programs will take an even bigger hit. Across the country, 7.4 million students with disabilities depend on accommodations supported by the department to get the equitable education they're entitled to. And without a federal agency enforcing these safeguards, there's nothing stopping schools from cutting corners and leaving students behind. But it isn't just protections for students with disabilities. In higher education, federally funded programs are keeping students like me in college. 87% of first-time undergraduates rely on federal aid. For millions of students like me, our chances at an affordable education would disappear right alongside the department. Without the Department of Education and the federal support I receive, I wouldn't have the opportunities that I do today, least of all the ability to earn a degree from my dream school. Trump's plans directly target longstanding protections for disabled students that have the power to transform lives. It's imperative that we do not let that happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dulce. We're going to wrap up. I just want to thank everybody on this call for joining us today. We scheduled this on the off chance that the EO to dismantle education would be released today. It hasn't, but that doesn't mean it's not going to come. Let's be real about that. This is their intention. This is what they've said. They do not believe in the students and families that have benefited from public education. One thing that we heard today is that we need the department to ensure that all students have pathways to succeed and thrive. As Dulce said, we cannot lose services for students with disabilities, such as support for kiddos who have been diagnosed with dyslexia. We also cannot trust all states to direct resources to the communities that states have already failed for years. Few states currently provide the dollars necessary to fully fund education in their states on their own. That after school program that your kiddo goes to every day after school to keep them safe could be gone. What about our students, such as our LGBTQIA students, who continue to be bullied? What about several school districts in this country who have fought to make sure that only certain students can attend those schools? Let's be clear, this EO is going to create chaos for schools, families, and communities, and we will oppose it, and we will oppose it with the communities behind our backs. I want to open the floor to questions. I really do thank everybody for showing up. If anybody wants to speak to any of our presenters, please email a follow-up with your email in the chat. Cole, C-O-L-E Wozniak, W-O-Z-N-I-A-K @gmail is going to help direct you. And now let's open the floor for some questions.
Hey, Denise, our first question is in the chat from Howard Bloom of the LA Times. Can you separate the issues of dismantling the U.S. Department of Education versus weaponizing the Department of Education in pursuit of the Trump administration's policy goals? And to what extent is there an inherent contradiction between President Trump's goal of returning education to the states and his goal of enforcing ideological goals with the threat of withholding federal funds?
I would love Chancellor King to take this. John, can you help us out here?
Sure. Look, we're facing both threats, the threat of loss of funding for critical programs and the threat of weaponization, particularly of the Office for Civil Rights. And that weaponization is about bringing control of what students do day to day in the classroom to Washington. It's saying that we're going to tell teachers what books can be read in class. We're going to tell schools what posters can be on walls. This is the Trump administration trying to take away the ability of schools, communities, higher education institutions, as Becky Pringle described, to teach the truth about our history, to have a curriculum where students are exposed to diverse authors, to help students grapple with both the wonderful things that have occurred in the nation's history and the awful things that have been a part of our history, like the institution of slavery. So it's terrifying to see this potential weaponization of the Office for Civil Rights. What we need the Office for Civil Rights to do is to protect students' rights, to make sure that students are in safe and supportive school communities, to intervene when states and districts are not serving students well. And that's the tradition of the department. That's one of the reasons the department was founded in the first place.
Denise, could I add, in addition?
Yes, please, Becky, please, yes.
So, the weaponization is not only in the office of using the Office of Civil Rights in the exact opposite way as Sean just described that was designed, but also standing up the portal to tattletale on anyone in K-12 or higher education who is actually teaching a diverse curriculum. As you've seen, I hope you've seen just this grassroots effort of people who are flooding that zone and talking about the value of diversity and equity and inclusion in this country. That is the kind of mobilizing and organizing that's happening spontaneously because people realize that what they are doing is not okay and it is not serving our students. So they're finding all kinds of ways to weaponize the department, even as Linda McMahon described it as her final mission. They're trying to go out with a bang and destroy as much as they can.
Thank you, Becky. We have a question from Naz. Hi there, this is Naz from K-12 Dive. Is it possible that on the quest for the administration to cut fraud, abuse, and waste, that the administration actually causes more of that by gutting the department since it's responsible for federal oversight, civil rights investigations, etc. By starving funding and slimming programs, could waste and fraud go under the radar? Keri, you want to take a shot at this?
Yeah, I think that's entirely true because, you know, a lot of again, the function that we talk about the U.S. Department of Education is oversight and making sure that funding is being used well. And we're taking away our ability. I mean, some of the first cuts that we started to hear about was our ability to measure, to hold systems accountable, to assess, which doesn't make sense for a whole host of reasons. You know, aside from looking for, you know, waste and fraud and whatnot, it also gives us the ability to measure our competitiveness on the global stage. I can't make this in my head. I've been trying to struggle with the Republican mindset around some of this stuff because you sit in the Ed Workforce Committee and you hear the fear around, well, gosh, are we going to be able to compete on the global stage? Like, are we going to be able to compete with China and India and the European Union and have students that are prepared, you know, for the jobs and the economy of the future? And at the same time, we're trying to stop our ability to gauge whether or not we are competitive and do away with things like NAEP and the Institute for Educational Sciences, which allows us to determine which programs are actually helping our kids make those advancements. If we're not able to assess, if we're not able to have that data, we can't compete. If we can't compete and we can't compare, then we're out of the race. And that is a big problem for us as education, as a strategic national asset, talking about 10 to 15 years from now, the impact this will have on our economy, on our national security. You know, I've been trying for weeks to figure out how we cut these things, but at the same time, stay competitive. It just doesn't make sense, as does a lot of the things, unfortunately, that we are seeing coming out of the Trump administration.
And let me add, when you get rid of the inspector general, you are getting rid of the lead person responsible for identifying waste and fraud. There has been no effort to detect waste and fraud. The effort has been a search and replace, a simple word function, DEI, diversity, inclusion, and to cut anything associated with that. That's not waste, fraud, and abuse. That is about undermining our students, and our students are at risk. I'm also going to encourage, apparently you can raise your hand, reporters or friends of the media. Please do so if you have a question. And I'm going to go to Jonathan. Jonathan, the governor is no longer on, but you did have a question about CUNY and what steps are CUNY and the state taking to bolster support at the university level, I guess, in response to the executive order. The freeze of funding that affects researchers and attacks on DEI. John, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Well, look, we are very fortunate to have in Tish James an attorney general who has been leading the way on combating efforts to defund education. And so within hours of the Trump administration's effort to cut funding for the National Institutes of Health, Attorney General Tish James joined with 21 other attorneys general to file suit saying that action was inconsistent with the law, and they secured a temporary restraining order within 12 hours. We're going to continue to, in New York, make sure that we are standing up for our students and for these research dollars. That NIH funding supports research on Alzheimer's, on cancer, on the treatment of 9/11 first responders. Standing up for NIH dollars getting to universities is about standing up for the health and well-being of Americans. On the diversity, equity, inclusion front, look, those are core American values. They are core New York values. We are going to continue to work in our SUNY system, and I know CUNY and then in New York City feel similarly. We're going to keep working to make sure that our campuses are safe and supportive environments for all of our students.
John, there was another question for you. Based on your experience in the department, what would have happened to the department's task, activities, and oversight if your resources were cut during that time?
Look, I think the reality is without these dollars going to states and districts, students' education will be harmed. And without the existence of the department, you will have less oversight of civil rights enforcement. You will have less oversight of the responsible use of these dollars. One very clear example, during both the Obama and Biden administrations, we made significant efforts to ensure that students' Pell Grant dollars were well used, and as well as students' GI Bill dollars. And we cracked down on predatory for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of students, literally stealing their federal aid and giving them no value in return. What we saw during the first Trump administration is those companies, those for-profit colleges were empowered and encouraged by the administration, and they took away the oversight. I fear that that is part of what is intended here. Take away the oversight so that these predatory companies are able to take advantage of students.
Thanks, John. Erica, you have a question from Chalkbeat. Does funding automatically go away if the department is eliminated? At her confirmation hearing, McMahon seemed to try to separate those issues. First, Erica, the real question, I think we've been clear at EdTrust, other sources have been clear. It's going to take Congress to eliminate the Department of Education. Where there is some stickiness is about some of the programs that have not been authorized, but Title I is authorized by the Every Student Succeeds Act. IDEA funding is authorized through the Individuals with Disability in Education Act. CTE programs are authorized, career and technical education are authorized through the Perkins Act. Those would have to be eliminated by Congress, and the appropriators would have to zero those out too. I think what you're also speaking to is what if they decided to take some of those funds and give them directly to the states, to the governors, and what they're calling a block grant? For years, I've liked to call them a slush fund, right? When you are directing dollars to a state under the guise of an educational activity, that could be everything to a new football field, to other things that the governor or the elected state officials decide to call education. What you lose from block grants is an intentionality and a focus on the communities who need it most. And we've seen what has happened under other guises of a block grant. I sort of hate to say this, but the American Rescue Plan was a bit of a block grant, and with no real guidance about how states should intentionally use those funds to accelerate learning in the state, we haven't seen the progress that I think everybody was hoping for. So block grants are a real problem. And honestly, the reason why Congress authorized Title I, authorized IDEA, authorized programs to ensure that there was a focus on professional development, that there was a focus on career and technical education, is because of the concern, and a real concern, that states would not appropriately direct those funds to where they were needed. Let's go to Howard. Welcome, Howard, from the LA Times. Does federal law require Title I and IDEA to go through the U.S. Department of Education, or can management of these federally mandated programs be legally transferred to another agency without congressional approval. John, you're the former secretary on the call, but I invite Becky, Keri, others to answer with you.
Look, I think it's clear that elimination of the education department and the responsibilities it holds would require congressional action. And this is a moment where Congress needs to step up. It is also true that Congress appropriates funds. When Congress appropriates dollars, that's law. And what we've seen from this administration is an unwillingness to follow appropriations law, and that has been challenged in court. And so far, the courts have reaffirmed that when Congress appropriates dollars, they need to be spent in the way that Congress directed.
Becky, anything to add here?
Yeah, I would add, you know, we've all speculated as to why the executive order didn't come out today. I have no doubt that it has to do with the activism and folks lifting up their voices and demanding that members of Congress do their jobs. I think it also has a lot to do with them trying to figure out other ways in to get the money out of education that they want to get out of education. And so we're going to see, and have already seen a lot of that, and they'll find ways around, and they'll be going right up to the line and over it, and challenging us on all of those things. That's why we have to remain vigilant in fighting back in every effort, in every fight. So as you know, right now we're in the throes of a funding fight with the budget. And you better believe everything we've just talked about will be at risk in this budget that ultimately Congress will have to pass. And so we have to be engaged in that fight as well for all of the services, the special needs that our students that are most vulnerable have, all that we've been talking about. It will be on the line. So it's not only the demolishment of the Department of Education. It's not only the legal rights that are vested in the Congress. All of these fights we must take on, because we know that they will find any way possible to take money from our kids.
That's absolutely right. Thank you, Becky. Keri, I saw you come off mic.
I was just going to echo what Becky was saying. I mean, we've already heard from congressional Republicans that, you know, that want to cut $330 billion over 10 years, $33 billion this year. I mean, you can't do that in education funding without trying to touch Title I, without trying to touch special education funding. So all of this stuff, we've really got to remain vigilant and hold Congress accountable for answering these questions. And frankly, you know, all of us in the community here are going to remain hyper vigilant. Today, the order didn't come out. It could eventually come out. Like I almost feel like we got a stay of execution today, because at any point, we've got to stay on our toes. But I can tell you on behalf of the American families I represent, we're going to be there. And frankly, they've picked a fight with the wrong folks, because, you know, there are a lot of parents that advocate for education, but special education mamas, like really the wrong hornet's nest to kick, because we are ready for this moment, and we're going to come in and we'll hold them accountable, not only in the streets, but in the courts as well, because we will fight for our children's legal protection, and you can count on that.
Thank you, Keri. You know, we spent a lot of time on K through 12 issues, and I really encourage reporters to also think about higher ed, particularly the availability of Pell Grants and what they do for affordability and access, the IDR plans that allow folks to hopefully pay off their loans sooner. The public service loan forgiveness program, also at risk. Honestly, real questions about whether this administration will support historically Black colleges and universities. HSIs, MSIs, real question. I mean, tribal colleges article on the Times today about one of the tribal colleges being really at risk. I don't want you all to let that go. Really appreciate your time today. Let me just call out again for any further inquiries, please email Cole, COLE dot Wozniak, WOZNIAK @gmail.com. It's in the chat. And thank you to all the panelists. Really great discussion today, and I think really good elevation of what's at stake here, which is our students' future and honestly, this country's future. If we can't deliver on education, none of that's going to matter. So I just want to thank everybody. It's really good to be with you. And again, Cole Wozniak for any further questions. Appreciate y'all. Thank you, Winnie. Thank you, Becky, John, Dulce, Governor Hochul, Keri. This has been a really great conversation. Appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.